We've been talking about the fruits of the Spirit, and today we're going to be talking about peace. Now, peace is such a huge gift. It means so many different things, doesn't it? Freedom from war, freedom from conflict in the smaller, everyday sense, freedom from aggression and fear, freedom to stop and smell the flowers and see the beauty in the world, freedom from our own internal turmoil and demons. And yet, it's a gift which we can make it difficult to receive in so many ways. So that can be like holding on to grudges, or not making time to hear from God, or just desperately trying to control things and keep so many balls in the air. I don't know how many of you were at the service yesterday, but Kim was preaching, and she was talking about how there are a lot of things that can get in the way of hearing from God, of hearing God's perspective. And these are things that can get under your skin and prevent you from living in true relationship with God, with walking with God and gently becoming formed into the people that God is leading us to become. So she talked about a lot of things. It was a really good talk. It's worth catching up on. So there were things like being afraid that can get in the way from you hearing from God, or perhaps feeling unworthy, or worrying about things that you've done, or other internal barriers that can prevent you from hearing from God. But I really believe that whatever else is happening inside you or in the world, God is calling us out into the people that we are going to become and making the world into the world as God longs for it to be. So today we're going to talk about a passage from Mark's Gospel and a couple of ways that it talks about God bringing peace. So it's a passage that starts with Jesus on the boat with the disciples. He's been preaching about the kingdom of heaven in a number of ways, from the lamps under the bushels passage to some of the ones about harvesting. So there's a lot going on, and possibly the disciples have got a little bit worried about some of the things he's saying. So they get into this boat with Jesus to go to the other side of the lake, and we'll see what happens next. It's from Mark's Gospel, Mark 4.
That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was, in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet! Be still!" Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him."
So looking at this passage, there are a number of things that we're going to draw out. There's loads more in the passage, of course, but there are just a few that we're going to talk about. And the first one is that where does God bring peace? So God doesn't bring peace in the middle of a really perfect day in the sunshine where they're all sitting around meditating beautifully. Instead, this is a day when God brings peace in the middle of fear and turmoil. And if the disciples were scared of this storm, it must have been a really terrible storm, because most of them were professional fishermen. So they probably had quite a high bar in terms of what's scary. Yet in the middle of all of this storm and turmoil, God brought God's peace. So I think from this we can all take that you don't have to be in a really good place to receive God's peace. It doesn't matter if life feels like you're in the middle of the storm. That's okay. And if you ask for it, God will bring peace to the waves around you, peace to the waves inside your head. if you pray for it and you're willing to accept it. But it may not always look exactly like you picture it. Like, I think when the disciples see Jesus calm the storm, that's not quite the peace that they imagined. They didn't think it would happen like that. It was a little bit scary, but it was peace. The second thing that we need to look at is that Jesus was asleep, but the disciples were still safe. And I think that's kind of important, because even if it feels like God might be asleep in your life, and I don't think God out there is so anthropomorphic that God has naps, but even if God is kind of still in your life, God is still there. Even if it feels like the storms are getting out of control, God is still there, still safeguarding you from evil and leading you towards a place of peace. You may not feel like that, but there is that kind of background story anyway. Ultimately, we believe that God has overcome evil, and God is making the world into the place that God longs for it to be. So God will keep you even in the most terrifying of storms, even if in your prayer life it feels like Jesus is asleep. The other thing we can take from that is that Jesus was obviously a really great napper. I mean, I can't imagine maintaining a nap in the middle of that, but he was obviously really good at that kind of self-care. I think, thirdly, the important thing to notice is that he doesn't just calm the disciples down and say, it's going to be okay, we're going to get through this storm. He also sorts out the storm outside. So God's peace acts in two ways. It both works inside you, helping you deal with your fears and giving you strength to face them and giving you space to remember who you are. But it does also change the world around us. Brings peace to situations that we can't control. And ultimately, I really do believe that the world is bending towards justice. So even when it feels like there are things that are out of control, like war out there, I believe that God's peace is healing the world. Jesus is out there calming the waves. Just sometimes it can be difficult to see it in the particular moment. And I think we see that in quite a lot of things, like perhaps one of the ones that speaks to me most at the moment is one of the things that I think is really wonderful is that you sort of see parents and grandparents who are just much more gentle with children than a couple of generations ago. I think that is a way in which the world is getting better, when it's bending towards peace, that kind of gentleness that is growing through the ages. And I really do believe you can see God in that. There'll be other examples that you can think of, things that are slowly getting better, getting easier. But I do think the world is moving towards peace and that God is in there. And I think that God also works inside each of us. So my experience of God's peace has often been when I've been in a bad place and everything's going round in my head like it's in a dishwasher. Washing machine. Washing machines go round, dishwashers don't. But yes, and those thoughts are just churning around and you're feeling frustrated and angry and out of control. And I do believe that with prayer and with sometimes just saying, God, I really need you to get in my head and just fix this for me, change me however you need me to, then God can gradually bring that peace inside you, turn that washing machine off, let it slow down. God can heal the lack of peace inside you, the fears inside you that make it difficult, the pain, bitterness, resentment. And with prayer and a choice to let God do what God needs to do inside you, it is possible. I really do believe that.